Hello, and welcome to Career Pathways with Adeola Kagho, the podcast that brings you real stories, honest reflections, and transformative insights that help you navigate your careers with clarity, courage, and purpose. So, whether you're just starting out, you're reinventing your path, or you're pursuing global impact, this is a space where we explore possibilities through the journeys of others so you can challenge your thinking and then take that next step with intention. Over the past episodes, we've had the privilege of listening to very impressive career journeys marked by growth, reinvention, pivots, resilience, and impact. And we've decided that every now and then, we will bring in experts to help us make sense of some of the pressing questions that professionals are asking nowadays. And today I am joined by a very seasoned global HR leader, Onyeri, who interestingly started a career in Nigeria, but has gone on to build a very impressive international career across multiple countries and global leadership roles. Ada is also the author of Local to Global, a book that reflects her career journey and shows us what careers that transcend borders really mean. Ada, it's such a pleasure to have you on Career Pathways with Adeola Kagho today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I think the pleasure is mine, and I'm looking forward to the conversation.
I'm so looking forward to it, Ada. And I'm so happy to have you, helping us distill some of those questions that professionals have on their mind. And so we'll get straight into it. And I'll start with, early career or foundational questions. Nowadays, professionals kind of feel a pressure to have their careers figured out right from the beginning. In your experience, how much do you think that early career decisions really determine long-term outcomes?
Okay, thank you so much for that. And when you talk about early careers, I think this is taking me back to almost looking back 20 years ago, 21 years
Mm,
ago. So that's quite some time to look back at. But what I say is that, the early career phase is less about a grand strategy in the sense that um, having some decisions does help, in the final picture further down the line. But what is most important is foundations in terms of habits. So investing in the right habits, investing in the right relationships, investing in building a right reputation, a positive reputation, a credible reputation, because those tend to compound with time. So
mm,
you can never go wrong with having a strong foundation with a credible reputation. So I didn't come out of school going into the workplace and have everything figured out. Okay,
mm,
I didn't, and I know the pressure is real because you see other people who seem to have it all put together. One of the things I call out is don't compare your finish or your start to someone else's middle or finish. And I think that's where the pressure comes. And sometimes people are comparing not apples with apples, but apples with grapes, right? In that sense. So invest definitely in building the right habits, invest in building the right reputation, invest in building the right relationships. So we talk about network, all that, have that. But what is most important is have an open mind,
mm,
that things will not follow the path that you probably thought. You know what? The direction you were headed at 25 is not necessarily where you will arrive at 45. And that has been my experience. I left school. I graduated with a degree in math and computer science. Many people don't know
wow.
that. Yes, I studied math and computer
It's
science
I
in,
also
in
did that.
Yes, for 5 years. So I studied that for 5 years. But my very first job was in copywriting.
Mm,
Now, that looks like two extremes, right? In that sense. And from copywriting, I moved into commercial roles before I finally found myself in HR. And who knows what next, where the path will lead me. Why am I sharing this? Is the path is non-linear, as people tend to think it will be. What is most important is having that growth mindset, and that you will learn, you will unlearn, you will relearn. So you don't necessarily have the full fine picture of what am I going to be doing through 5 to 10 years, 15 years. But one thing you may probably do is have a positive mindset and a possibility mindset, an abundance mindset as well too, versus the scarcity mindset. And that would help you grow through the journey.
Wow, lots of nuggets you've shared there, and I'll just try to paraphrase some of the things that jumped at me. So, I think one key thing you're telling professionals out there is the fact that, look, while it's important to have some sort of vision or strategy, it's not necessarily all about that, because your career
Mm-mm.
would evolve over time. But there's some critical things like building certain habits, also things like reputation. Very
Mm.
important to make sure that in your early career you're building a good reputation, being known for things like hard work, things like discipline. You spoke about networking. Is also the time to sort of build your network. And I love the one you said about being open-minded, because careers evolve. It's important to be open-minded. Like, you
Mm.
studied maths, but eventually you've ended up in HR. If you didn't have the open mind, you probably would have not been where you are today. So those are things that I feel are very critical for professionals to know. So thanks a lot.
Mm.
Moving on to the next question, and still on pressure. There's also a lot of pressure for people to move very quickly in their careers. How
Mm.
would you advise professionals to think about timing, patience, and readiness as they grow their careers?
Mm. That pressure is real. But you know what? What I said, Diola, is that moving fast and moving well are not the same thing. There's
Mm,
speed,
mm.
there's speed and there's quality, you know,
Moving
attached to that.
fast and moving well are not the
Well, not the same
same.
thing,
All right, tell us the difference, Ada.
Yeah. So moving fast is jumping through the loops.
Mm,
And actually when you're interviewing people, it's not so much as how fast they have moved, but how much have they gathered, have they learned, have they grown through those movements. So nobody's going to give you an accolade because you are moving every two years or every 3 years. I actually don't believe that there is a set time to define tenureship in roles. So tenured in roles. I personally don't believe that. I believe that each role is unique in itself. But one thing I consider a principle in terms of determining the timing is look back and say, how much have I grown in this role? And also think of it in terms of, have I been able to solve something difficult? Have I built something that will, represent me? Have I been able to experience the impact of my actions? I think that is for
mm,
me the critical one, especially for leadership roles and roles that are perhaps individual contributor, but are critical roles. So you have some senior roles, not people leadership, but they are still critical. Have you stayed long enough to experience the impact of your actions? For example, I'm a transformation manager. Transformation success is not when we say we've gone live with the new system. We've gone live with that's actually where the rubber hits the road. So if a transformation
absolutely.
manager feels I have delivered, we've implemented the new system, and so I can move on. No, that's still early. Have you experienced the impact of those decisions that you took on the end users? Right? So at the end of the day, the end users have to experience that, and you also get feedback. Just putting that in context. Now, for patience, we say patience is a virtue, right?
Yeah.
There's patience in a career. There's also what you call passivity, right? So
Mm,
for me, it's very much about professionals, young professionals, to ask themselves, you know, have I genuinely outgrown this role, or am I leaving because I feel uncomfortable? Now, discomfort is not necessarily a bad thing in itself, um, because it is information. It's telling you
Yeah.
something, you know, and if you are leaving because you just feel uncomfortable, you probably are leaving too early for that. So there are seasons in life, and there are seasons where discomfort will teach you. From my experience, I have learned a lot more from the discomfort seasons, right? In that sense. So that's where the patience is asking yourself, am I leaving for the right reasons? And readiness, in the sense of readiness, you don't wait for readiness, you stretch into readiness.
Mm.
And young
You don't
professionals
wait
need to
for
know that. Sometimes
readiness.
people
You
think,
stretch.
yeah, people think that I have to be 100% ready. I say, no, you stretch into that readiness.
Wow. Thanks a lot for that, Ada. So what I'm hearing is that the pressure is real, right? Um, but there are a few things that professionals need to look at to decide whether they've really stayed long enough in a role.
Mm,
So the one that jumped at me was impact. If you had the opportunity to be in the role, you delivered one or two projects, but didn't get the opportunity to experience the impact or didn't stay long enough to experience the impact, then the quality of that experience is not really what it should be. And then you ask yourself questions like, have you been challenged? Have you learned everything that you need to learn in that position that you are in? So yes, the pressure is there, but those are some of the
mhm,
indicators that we can use to measure whether we're really ready for the next role. And so we don't
mhm,
necessarily need to allow ourselves to be pressured by other people. You said something about comparison as well. That's something that we need to be careful for as
mm,
professionals. So thanks a lot, Ada. Ada, you've had the privilege of experiencing or having a lot of opportunities. And I want to ask
mm.
because I know that there are people who have been on the lookout for these opportunities, but it's not just happening. Um, how do these opportunities really come about, especially at senior levels, at global levels? Is it about performance? Is it visibility? Because we hear a lot of things. People teach us that we have to be very visible. You look for sponsors. I mean, what exactly is it? How do these opportunities come along, really?
Uh, I think for at senior levels, and it's great that you specific about senior levels, because the approach slightly differs across the career seasons.
Mm,
From my experience at senior levels, actually is a convergence of that what you've mentioned. It's not one or the other. And what do I mean? But maybe some are more amplified at senior levels. So you've got relationships, you've got performance, you've got sponsorship, and then of course timing, if everything aligns, when the opportunity aligns, right? So the key thing is, I always say, for every, irrespective of any role or of cadre or of level or of seasons, performance is the entry point, because nobody is going to be sponsoring somebody who is not a
yeah.
performer. So performance is definitely what gets you in. It's what puts you on the list, if you say it that way. Now, relationships, the relationships you've built prior to that season, that moment. Because sometimes people tend to think it is in the moment I'm looking for a job that I start building relationships. And I think it's a bit too late in that moment. You should have invested into that bank, not just drawing from the bank. You have invested into the relationship, the networks you've had. So the relationship then puts your name in that conversation. So I've known Adeola for some time. Adeola knows that there are opportunities coming. Adeola is also on the hiring panel. I've had some conversations with Adeola. We've worked together. We've collaborated. She knows my credibility. But because of the relationship, she's putting my name in the conversation, right? So that's relationships. Relationships put your name in the conversation. But that's not all. Your visibility, you still have to be visible. to ensure that your name remains on the radar. You're still top of mind for people. And then sponsorship is what turns that are we considering? We're deciding. So it turns a consideration to a decision, because a sponsor is the one who will say, I'm staking my reputation
Yeah.
for this candidate. So that in itself is a game changer. I actually think on the senior level, if I were to categorize, I think that is a bit more important or relevant compared for senior people. And I know a number of people at senior levels tend to draw back on that. So you don't you don't leave sponsorship to chance.
Mm.
At senior levels, you've got to actively cultivate that and always check in. Do I have a sponsor? Do I still have
Mm.
the sponsor I had in the last role era seeking a job may not necessarily be the same sponsor available, especially if you're moving across industries, across firms, across geographies. So it's helpful to do a periodic check-in to say, who are the sponsors that I have who can still, speak up for me in the rooms I'm not there.
Wow, thanks, Ada. Very powerful nuggets. And I see an overlap in terms of
Hmm.
what you do in your early career versus what pushes you forward at senior levels.
Mm-hmm.
Because remember, you said to us that, look, you need to invest time early in your career in building
Hmm.
relationships. And that comes to play when you look for opportunities at senior levels. And I
Absolutely.
love the way that you had put it. You said, look, Adiola, it's a convergence of different things. It's a given
Hmm.
you have to be performing from your junior level up until when you become a senior. Performance is critical. But things like sponsorship, visibility, they become even more important at senior levels. And I like the nugget that you shared with us about the fact that you need to check in terms of your sponsors. The sponsor you had years ago when you were trying to maybe move within different sectors might not be the sponsor that you need at this point in time.
Mm-mm.
So you need to check that and ensure that you have the right sponsor who is mentioning your name in rooms that you don't have access to. Wow, very
Yes.
powerful. Thanks a
Yes.
lot,
And can
Ada.
I just add something to
All right.
build on that? The reason I say periodically checking is that sponsor may also not be relevant to the evolving world of work. So they were relevant
Mm,
5 years ago, but perhaps they themselves have not also evolved. So they are no longer strong enough to serve as a sponsor for you. So that's why you also need to do that checking. It's not just for self, but also for that sponsor. Is this the right
mm.
sponsor to have?
That's a powerful angle you've brought in. You need to check the relevance of that sponsor. That sponsor might
Mm-hmm,
no longer be relevant because the
mm-hmm,
future of work is evolving very
yeah.
fast. Wow, wow, wow. Thanks a lot for that perspective. Now we're going to a question that I really like asking. And I like asking this question because at some point I did a LinkedIn kind of search, and I
Mm,
found that a lot of people who progressed or had some major leaps in their careers had gone to elite schools. You know, the
mm,
schools that the globally elite schools. And so
mm,
my question is, if a professional did not have the opportunity to go to this elite school, or maybe to even start their careers or get the opportunity to be in multinational environments at any point in time in their careers, what steps can they take to remain globally competitive? Or does that mean that they cannot get global opportunities?
no. I love this question because it speaks to my story. I didn't go to
Mm,
one of the globally elite schools, so I can speak from experience. This is not theory. I went to a good school by all standards in Nigeria. I mentioned the Federal University of Technology, where I'm a a graduate of that school. Um, However, what works for me, and just speaking to my experience, is I think the first thing for me, if I look back at Deola, is the mindset.
Mm.
Uh, right from as a young adult, I've always had a possibility mindset. And I've always had an adventurous spirit. I'm sure if you speak to those who knew me growing up, they'll say Ada is the adventurous one. So like, the explorer nature in me had been there. So that worked to my advantage in terms of, okay, being open to navigate and pushing that. We say she was born with a silver spoon or a golden spoon. Some people were born with even wooden spoons, whichever one. What I say is, what do you do? You know, you were born with a wooden spoon, which means it was beyond your control. But now you've been born. What have you done to acquire that golden spoon? Okay.
Mm.
So first start with that mindset. Have that possibility mindset that it is possible. I think many people fail already in their mind before they even try. So they
Mm.
already give up because I don't have this background. They're not going to consider me. When I approached the multinational I started with decades ago, like I told you, I schooled it at Futo. Let me also shock you. You didn't mention something else. The degree, because people tend to also, many years ago, the level of the class of degree did matter. So it wasn't just enough that you went to an Ivy League or you went to an elite school. The class of degree did matter. So let me shock you. I didn't graduate with a first class. I didn't graduate with a 2-1, a second class upper. I graduated with a 2-2.
Mm.
And I will be very honest with you. I felt very disappointed with myself because the expectations from family up to that point, I was one of the very high performing students right from secondary school. So it was natural. I'd expected this girl was coming out with a first class. I did not even a 2-1. Now, if you look back, you remember back in Nigeria those days, multinationals, even the employers of choice, let me even put, say both local and global, were looking for 2-1 and first class and above.
Yep.
But that didn't deter me. One thing I knew was that either you're going places. I didn't know what shape
Mm.
and form it would take. I remember writing a note to myself after graduation convocation ceremonies. I went home to the village to meet my grandma. I was disappointed, yes, but I wrote a note and I said, I don't know what it would look like, but I know Ada, you're going places. And that note, I wrote it from my heart. I
Mm.
knew that whatever container, form, shape, I don't know. So that spurred me on. And I want to encourage people that don't give up on your story, in the sense that don't think that disqualifies you. I'm happy that these days there are less organizations talking about first class 2-1, from a degree perspective. So I talk about that. And then when I were hiring, so I've been as a hiring manager, as a hiring leader as well, into global firms, into multinational firms. What we're looking for is people who have a global mindset. Because there are people who sit in local spaces but are not ready to think global. They're not ready to challenge themselves. They're not ready to build relationships across context. They don't diversify. So you have to diversify your network. If your network is homogeneous, I'm sorry, you're not helping yourself. So just as we assess the sponsorship terrain, assess your network. It's not enough to say, I have a big network. Is it diversified enough? I'm looking to grow into global spaces, but am I having only people that look like me and have the same experiences as me in the same network? Then you're shooting yourself in the foot. So diversify your network. Have a heterogeneous network that you can tap into. Expose yourself. Today, the world, you can access a lot of information at your fingertips. Social media, we didn't have this much. I know we didn't have this much when I was building my career. So I tell the younger ones, you have a lot more of advantage, with social media and knowledge being very much available. Expose yourself to global concepts. Expose yourself to what's happening on global terrains. Know the language in your industry, right? That you want to go to on a global perspective. Global certifications. It's good to have local ones, but if you're planning to build into global spaces, I will be the first to tell you, acquire global certifications. And if you don't know what they are, a simple ChatGPT prompt can help you to say, what are the global certifications for me in the HR space? What are the global certifications for me in the marketing space? Because acquiring that gives you a bit of an edge as someone who, and shows that you're determined to move into those spaces.
Wow. Thank you, Ada. I'm still processing some of the things that you've said, but again, a few things jump at me. Firstly, you are an example that look, you do not necessarily need to have attended a global elite institution or even had a first class or a 2-1 to build an impressive global career, because you have built
Mhm.
one. And something that you said that I see that it's been a recurring theme, you said it before and you said it again
Mm,
in answering this question, is around the mindset. Very
mm,
powerful. You were saying that there are people who are already defeated in their minds. So maybe they came out of school with a 2-2 or a third class, they already feel defeated. So it's important to have
mm,
a growth mindset, an abundance mindset, plus something key that you said, especially from your lens as someone who has been a global hiring leader, is the fact that organizations are not even at this stage looking so much at whether it's a globally elite school that people have gone into or the class of degrees, especially.
mm.
But what's critical is that they're looking for people who have a global mindset. And that's where the
Yes.
auditing and also the auditing your network matters. You need a global network. Plus,
Mm,
if you know you want to build a global career, quite important to acquire the global certifications that can open doors for you to get into that global space. Wow, powerful. Thanks a lot for that. Now, your book, Local to Global, is really around the idea of um, crossing borders, right? And that word borders could mean different things more than even a physical boundary between countries. So when you use that word in terms of a global career context, what are you talking about, and what does it really mean for people to cross borders?
uh, you know, when I was writing this book, and actually when I wrote the book, it's interesting that when people see the title, "Local to Global and
To
Growth of
global.
Cross Borders." By the way, this is the book. In case I haven't put it on the screen, so anyone, well, this is the book. so so growth across borders. Now, the first thing that comes to mind for most people is when you see that or you hear of someone a global career is the geographical borders, right?
Mm,
The geographical borders that has moved about. I've lived in different continents, countries and continents. That is a part of it. That is a part of it. But that is not in my book, in my world, not the most significant. There are the tangible borders and there are the intangible borders. So borders, growing across borders refers to borders such as belonging, navigating
mm,
belonging in new environments. It's one thing that you've crossed the border into a new country, but that does not confer automatic belonging for you. So you've got
mm,
to navigate that. And the other thing is you don't necessarily have to cross geographies to navigate belonging. A candidate who's been hired and is now resuming the first day onboarding, you're also navigating belonging in a new culture, in a new setup. Or you've moved across cadres. You've
mm,
become a senior leader. The language changes. The room has changed as well. You probably are the youngest or the most recent of leaders on that leadership team. You're also navigating belonging. You're navigating acceptance. People need to, accept your credibility or vouch for your credibility, but it doesn't happen easily. You go through a lot to get to that space. So I talk a lot about that, navigating identity.
mm,
Who am I across different seasons of my life? And you know what I say? You cannot rise above your identity. No matter how much you've got a perfect strategy, a great, the strategy is very much top notch. If your identity work is subpar, I'm sorry, that strategy will not lift. So I tell people is you've got to do identity work. Who am I? Because you are evolving as the seasons of life are evolving. And it's important to be at peace with that. So from a career perspective, you're not just, if I'm speaking from a global career, yes, I'm navigating the difficulties of going into a new countries. And I tell you, my dear, it is not easy. The paperwork, documentation, ask anyone who's moved and lived abroad. It is not easy. We know that. But, that is at one side, the bureaucracy as well. But then there are the things that people don't see so easily. Those borders are
Mm,
very much important, but it's important that you also keep reminding yourself of your why. Why did I choose to do this? Because there will be difficult moments. There will be tough seasons, but your why will keep you going. So why did I choose to become a senior leader? Why did I choose to accept this role? Why did I choose to up my family and move across oceans and mountains and valleys? Why did I choose to leave a company I have known for 10 years to move into a new space? What's my why? That why will keep you going and growing across those borders.
hmm. Wow, Ada. The one that jumps at me is the issue of identity. You cannot
Mm.
rise beyond your identity. So, in other words, what you're saying is, as a professional, if you're thinking about crossing borders or global careers, then you first have to settle the issue of identity, who you are,
Yes. Who am I?
why you are also. Wow. Wow. That is powerful. Otherwise it'll be difficult to fit in where you even cross the physical borders. Wow. Wow.
Absolutely.
Thanks for that. And you
And
you
nobody will do
shared,
that work for you.
hmm,
Sorry, just to add,
hmm,
and nobody will, that's why it's more difficult. Because with things like the tangible physical borders, you've got support system. In companies, you have global international companies, you have global mobility, they are there to help you and your family with relocation and all that. Who is going to help you with identity work? Who's going to
hmm.
help you with navigating belonging? There's not much support happening there. It's more leaning on you. And that's why it's the more
Wow.
difficult one compared to the physical or tangible borders.
So the perspective you're adding is beyond crossing physical borders. There's a lot more about crossing borders that professionals
Yes.
who are thinking about physically crossing borders should start thinking about. Think about
Yes.
your identity, think about how you're going to navigate bureaucracy and all the other things that come with crossing borders. Wow. Thanks a lot for
Yes.
that, Ada. There are a number of professionals that I know who have been trying to sort of do what you've done, start your career locally, and then eventually transition to building an international career. But it's been difficult. And so that leads me to asking, are there certain capabilities that travel well or better
Mm,
across countries and cultures that then open the doors for these opportunities?
That's a very interesting question, Adiola. Um, for me, it's starting with the person, what you bring across. I think every continent, every multinational, every geography will appreciate that you are a credible person, that we can rely on this person, irrespective of geography. I mean, I've lived and worked in different, I haven't seen any geography, any group of people or any organization that will say it doesn't really matter the credibility. So you've got to first of all be a credible person. Your reputation speaks well of you, and you're seen to be consistent in your delivery in who you are, right? So that credibility is there. And then I would say navigating, capabilities. One other thing is navigating ambiguity. Um, we say today the world is a VUCA world. It's very volatile, it's
Yeah.
uncertain, it's complex, it's ambiguous. And you see that even on a heightened dimension, in multinational in global firms, because you're dealing with different levels there of complexity, of volatility, and all that. So ability to navigate ambiguity, being very comfortable in the gray. You're not going to have things really figured out for you, but you've got to be able to make decisions as you go. Because what is happening in India is not necessarily rhyming with what's happening in Nigeria. It's not necessarily, so there's a lot of levels of complexities there, and you're not going to have the full picture all the time. So be very comfortable. That was one of the things I would say I personally struggled with initially, and I've learned to build as I worked in global spaces, and also as I grew across levels. I think even a lot more at senior levels, navigating ambiguity. And then I would say adaptability we talk about. So being able to adapt to this. So building on that navigating ambiguity is that adaptability. Are you able to adapt to constant changes? Things are happening, at a very fast pace. Are you able to adapt to that? Then we come to what people will say is the softer side, but I consider that the hard part. It's emotional intelligence, because you come into rooms, especially in remote setup. I've
Mm,
led teams, hybrid spaces, diverse teams located, distributed across geographies. Emotional intelligence and its sister, we talk about cultural intelligence, although I tend to add it to say cultural humility, right? So intelligence, you're knowing about it's more awareness and how to adapt. But the cultural humility is the posture you take, a posture of respect for for the other culture. So it's not about tolerance. And I see people who struggle is they're coming with the mindset of we're tolerating. No, you're not tolerating. You're respectful of the other culture. And emotional combined with emotional intelligence, you you are more you're more you're positioned to navigate those terrains, because you're not coming from a judgmental perspective. You're coming from an open mind. I want to also understand perspectives. You're accepting of perspectives. And that means that I can also shift my opinions because I now understand the other's perspectives. If you've worked in homogeneous groups for a while, you tend to think in a very homogeneous way. It's either black or white. But when you come into global spaces, if you want to build into global spaces, you've got to drop that and say
mm,
it would not always be black or white. It's just different. So you see, the language changes. It's neither right or wrong. It's just different. It's just
mm,
a different perspective. It's not a wrong perspective. It's a different perspective. So that's that. And then ability to communicate across difference. That speaks to how do you adjust your style without losing your substance? Are you
mm,
able to adjust that in different rooms you go into? Like I told you, I had teams sitting in Costa Rica, sitting in Bangalore, sitting in the United States, sitting in Africa across different countries, and in Europe here. And so you learn to understand that the communication styles you would switch it a bit, you will adjust it a bit as you mix with those rooms, but you don't lose your substance. You're not performing a different personality, so to say, but it's that, accommodation, genuinely connecting to the people based on their lens, not on your lens.
So other things, thanks a lot for that. What I hear is that look, any employer would value a dependable person. So that's definitely a capability that people should focus on building, being reliable, being dependable. You then spoke about being comfortable with ambiguity,
Mhm.
emotional intelligence, things like that are the capabilities that travel well. Okay, if we looked at it from the perspective of the new world of work and with AI now being one of the biggest topics that we're discussing now, are there any additional capabilities that you would then suggest that um, people focus on for them to be more competitive, especially as they seek global opportunities?
When we speak to, of course, for me, there are technical skills,
Hmm.
and then there are what we consider as the soft skills. So I was speaking more of the soft skills
Yeah.
because my experience is that people tend to over focus on the technical skills and less on the soft skills. However, the reverse is actually the requirement. So you can have the technical skills and still fail in a global career because you're not able to navigate ambiguity. You don't have that cultural intelligence or the cultural humility. You're not able to communicate across contexts, across different contexts. So that's why I emphasize that. Now, today's world with AI, what's happening on the AI space? What should we look at? Everyone should. I mean, for me, is the days of wondering what will be the impact of AI on my job and all that. I think those are behind us now. The reality is that AI has come. AI has come. And I think everyone, irrespective of roles, of titles, of levels, should acquaint themselves with knowledge of AI as a basic, Prompt engineering, I think, is going to be a much sought after skill.
Mm,
Why do I say that? Myself, you, we could all have Gemini, Claude, Copilot, whatever, name them, but the quality of output is dependent on the quality of input. And that's where the prompt engineering skill comes up. So I tell young people today, if you see any free webinar or sessions that are talking about prompt engineering, please jump on it. Because and then keep trying and refining your prompts. As you do that, you become a much sought after professional, and not just I know cloud. It's how do I know? I mean, I know how cloud works, and I know how to work with cloud to give me what output I need versus work with Gemini versus work with a Copilot or with ChatGPT. And then I think that it's also important. What will be more important or relevant is not just for global spaces, even local spaces, like just the world generally, is that um, we've got to change the mindset of AI as a competitor and see AI as a collaborator.
absolutely.
You know, I think that's why many people fear. The fear comes when you see it as a competitor. What will set people apart are the people who are able to work quite well with AI as a thinking partner. And certain skills will still, AI is not going to take away empathy. I mean, looking at what we have, I cannot really project for 20 years from now. But looking at where we are now in the current space, AI is not able to make certain decisions. So critical thinking and decision making with empathy are not one of its strengths. So as humans, we will still be required to deal with that. So prompt engineering, but also don't lose the other parts of being human.
Mm.
I think that's the most important part. I think we're spending so much time on AI. AI is going to do this to us, AI that I fear, Adeola, that we're losing the essence of being human. And I hope we don't get to a stage where we will now be having webinars and sessions to train people on how to
On
be
being
human,
human.
like we are doing. Yeah, like we're doing now, training people on how to use AI. Hopefully, we won't get to that stage where we are training people on how can you just be human.
Wow. Thanks for the nuggets. The key thing I hear is we need to settle this issue around AI. AI has come to stay. And so for those who want to be relevant, make sure that you focus on prompt engineering because that is
Yes.
going to be the differentiator. Fantastic. Fantastic. Thanks, Ada. So my next question is, in your experience, have you picked up some misconceptions that people have around moving abroad and international careers? Are there misconceptions that professionals have?
There definitely are.
You want to share
You know,
maybe
when people
some?
hear, yeah, when people hear international careers or moving abroad, it sounds all glamorous. It sounds all smooth. It sounds all structured and, better resourced and all that. And sometimes it's true. So I don't want to, I don't begrudge that point. Sometimes it's true, but in most cases, it's not so true. So let me demystify it a little bit. Some of the things that people don't talk about it enough. And it's not to scare anyone, but it's to ensure that you are well prepared, you know, as you move into that terrain. One of the misconceptions is that once you have an international career lineup on your CV, then all doors are opened onto you. It's not automatic.
Mm,
You still
mm,
remember what we talked about, having the right sponsors, investing in that. You still have to do that. So the fact that your CV shows you've worked in multinational firms, you've lived and worked in different locations, it's not an automatic, offer at your doorstep. You still need to articulate what you've been able to deliver,
mm,
So that I think is one misconception people have. The second misconception people have is, like I said, that it's all smooth and rosy. It can be very isolating,
mm,
and I wrote a LinkedIn post very recently about global careers, what people, what they don't tell you, what you don't say. And I'll just say a few things from there. One is that you become too international for home
oof,
and never too local for your host location to where you are. So you're somewhere caught in between, in the
mm,
middle, especially if you've been away from home for a while, right? You're somewhere caught in between, in there, and nobody sees that, you
mm,
know. And then there are the dimensions of sacrifices,
mm,
moving with, like myself, who moved with family. People are sacrificing for the glorious career, the excellent career that people see out there. There's been sacrifices. And it's not just you sacrificing, it's all the others, the dependents, the spouse that are sacrificing as well to go in there, right? Because, kids have to leave schools, change schools quite often. That doesn't come on the CV, but excuse me, but I can tell you, as a woman who's moved and, with kids, it is not the easiest. And if you speak to people in similar spaces, they will tell you it's not so easy because there's a lot you're navigating there. And then you also, one other thing that is important is that your network doesn't travel with you. Yeah, I love to
mm,
say that. You've built a network, imagine I'm lifting your roots from Nigeria to Canada. You're starting sort of from zero to build the network. For the network, you're definitely building from zero because that network is not lifting and shifting with you.
mm,
You've become so comfortable with, if it's in Nigeria, I have XYZ people to call on for things, and I lift and shift to Portugal, to Canada, to UK. I've got to start to rebuild that network. Another thing is you walk into rooms and your reputation, the people don't know your reputation, your credibility. So you work
you have to reestablish.
so hard to reestablish that credibility in that room, even more when you are of an underrepresented group.
Mm,
Like a woman of color like myself, you tend to do even twice as much, you know, to build or rebuild that credibility because they don't really know. It didn't really move it. Then, yes, now it's a new team, it's a new geography, and the constant code switching, learning to say the right things in the right room. Am I supposed to diminish, not diminish, to reduce what I say or bring my full self to this room? What do I do? That's a lot of emotional labor that is not often expressed, very widely.
wow, wow, powerful, Ada. So, in other words, people think that when you have an international career, everything is rosy. But they have no idea of the sacrifices that go into it.
Mhm.
on the family side. And there are lots of things that need to be prepared for. So the networks you spoke about, you have to start building networks again. You have to start reestablishing your credibility. So if you're a professional out there, you're thinking about global opportunities, it's not to say that you shouldn't pursue it, but prepare
No.
yourself mentally for this kind of challenges or things that you'll have to navigate as you transition. I love the next question that I'm about to ask you. So Ada, you've transitioned and moved across many countries, being a working mom. And there are many professionals at the moment who are really contemplating, with the realities of motherhood and thinking they need to give up the one for the other. So, what advice would you give that professional who's thinking that she has to choose between a career and also showing up fully as a mother at home?
Thank you. You know why I smile and I love that question is because if I could get $1 or a euro for every time I got asked that question, I would definitely be a wealthy woman. Maybe more wealthier than those who've won the lottery ticket.
And that's one of the questions on the minds of working moms today. And really that's
Yes,
why we are here in this expert session to help them with those questions.
absolutely, absolutely. So let me start with the premise itself. The way it's presented, and that's highly a construct from society, is that
Mm,
it's a binary choice between motherhood and ambition and a
mhm,
successful career. It's almost like there are two ends that will never meet. Um, and I think that makes it more exhausting for the mothers, for the working moms, because just thinking that, it's either a successful career or being a successful mom, that in itself, puts some pressure on them.
mm,
Um, I'm here to say you don't have to choose. You can leave both. And that has been me. So I tell people I share my story because I'm a living proof that you can be both a successful woman in chasing the pursuit of your ambition and also be a successful mother, depending on what the nature of motherhood looks like for you. But that doesn't come easy. That is
mm,
not a walk in the park. There will be certain things that need to happen. The reality is that nobody succeeds in life on a solo mission. So
mhm,
you definitely need a support system, a strong support system. That for me has been one of my most critical success factors as a working mom, as a career mom. What do I mean by a support system? Support system could mean your spouse, support system. But for single moms, you don't have a spouse, but it could be some siblings, some parents, friends that you can guarantee you call in when the chips are down, who are there to support you in different forms. It could be physical support, it could also be mental and emotional support. So a solid support system is key. Mentors, senior professionals who've walked that path before, like we're talking about, listen to them, connect with them. You don't necessarily need to create your own experiences. You can learn from others' experiences as well and avoid certain, pitfalls along the way. Then, what has also helped me is developing healthy boundaries.
mm,
Healthy boundaries both at work and also at home. I think sometimes when we talk of healthy boundaries, people tend to think of it in either way. Either it's healthy boundaries in the workspace or healthy boundaries at home. No, it's both. For you to be successful and to protect your energy, you need that. You've got to invest in that. I give you example. When I was going on maternity leave, one of the boundaries I set was I told my MD that you're not going to be able to contact me you know it may look like I'm out for many months and you feel like it's not work. It is out for a purpose that is even more than the work you see. So What I did was invest in my who was representing me for the period, the interim lead, and I said, she's empowered. You've got everything you need to ask. You go to this person. I didn't drop my number, no corresponding number. I only gave it to my interim lead. I said, she is the only person who can contact me. Now, it didn't come easy. I did this on my second maternity leave. My first, I wasn't that wise. I was so eager. Of course, it was my first senior role, and I had stepped into a role where there were lots of question around the credibility of being the first local woman to be in this. So there was pressure to perform. And I was going on mat leave 8 months after. So what did I do, Adeola? I dropped all my forwarding contacts. So you can contact me anytime, anytime you have a need. Guess what? The MD did. And I was in time zone of 6 hours difference with my location. So you can imagine being contacted at odd hours, and that's because I allowed it.
Mm.
So I tell people, I learned the second time, I could not blame them because I allowed it. I gave the permission. I said, feel free to contact me. So be careful the words you use out there. Feel free to contact me is an offer. I will take that offer. But you know what you need. As a mom who is waking up at odd hours and tending to a little one, you need to take care of yourself. So healthy boundaries, and even at the home front, what are the boundaries that you need to set with your spouse and with your children to say, you see, mommy is not going to be available for this period. So please do respect that mommy is not available. However, when I finish, when I'm done, I'm going to be there with you. Right? So that's it. And it's quality over quantities. That's where many people have mom guilt. I've
Mm.
experienced it as well. I'm not there as much as I need to be, as often as I need to be. I learned to find peace with myself, that I may not always be there, but I will make the best of when I am there. So that's the part about being more present than performing. So I'm being present. I take off the distractions, the mobile phones and other things. We're here to be able to play. And I prioritize what is most important to them. But you also have to involve them as well. If you have kids are growing up, let them know that this is the nature, the terrain of the world. Sometimes we tend to think that these kids don't know. They do know more than we assume. But
Absolutely.
if you co-work with them and say, you see, this is how things are. So now you have 5 things you want mommy to do or you want mommy to be present for. Which is most important for you?
Mm.
And that helps. So you then know it's number 1 and number 3. I don't need to spread myself too thin to make up for the 5 places. And when I am there for the number 1 and the 3, I make it count. So those are the healthy boundaries, co-build priorities with the stakeholders. Your family is a stakeholder. The workplace is a stakeholder. And I would say resist the urge to live your life on inherited societal expectations. You've got to define what success looks like for you. Success for you now could just be that I get an 8 hour sleep every night. And that is what it is. It takes a lot to get that, but that is what success looks like for you. And some other person's success could be, I am the vice president of a multinational. So don't live a life on someone else's template. Don't live on inherited expectations. Define success for yourself.
And that was just so packed. And I believe that professionals who are working moms are going to take so much away from the response that you've given to that. Just a lot. Starting from the mindset. I mean, why do you need a mindset to think that the two must compete against each other? They can coexist. And like you said, you are living proof.
Mhm,
You've had to move across borders and you've been able to sort of make sure that these two coexist. You didn't have to choose one over the other. So,
mhm,
dear professional, be comforted. But like you said, it's not a walk in the park. There are things
mhm,
that you need to put in place. You need support systems. I love the fact that it's not only about physical support. You mentioned that loud and clear. There's also the mental support. And I love the fact that you had even spoken to single parents to say,
Mhm.
look, you could get support from your siblings, from mentors. Wow, that was really packed. I love the healthy boundaries part. You have to set boundaries. And I like that
Mm.
trick, that nugget that you gave us in terms of how you had given your number to only that person who was
Yes.
standing in for you. Wow, I'm just trying to imagine how that played out. But I mean, it's a very practical strategy that people should learn for. And I love the co how did you put it?
Co-build. Co-build
Co-building with the
priorities.
stakeholders, with the children.
Yes.
We shouldn't think that
Yes.
they're too young. Let them know. Be transparent about the fact that you can't be available all the time. But the time that you
Yes.
will be available will be quality time. So let's
Yes.
co-build it. Which is priority for you? Wow, that was really, really, really packed. So we're getting to the end of today's session, and I'd like to ask you, there are many professionals that they look successful on paper, you know what, but they feel
Hmm.
disconnected from meaning and fulfillment. What do
Hmm.
you believe makes a career truly meaningful over time?
So that's a very interesting question. And I will start by saying the definition would be different.
Mm,
Building on what I said earlier on, that don't inherit other people's templates. So what I consider a meaningful career may not necessarily be what Adeola would consider as a meaningful career, because my definition of success is different. I think that most people have not sat in with themselves to determine what does success look like for me from a career perspective. Maybe they look at it from success from a task orientation, but from a career perspective, what does it look like? So, and meaning is not a fixed destination. It's something you're going to culture over time and renegotiate with yourself, because the seasons are evolving. And as
mm,
those seasons are evolving, you've got to stay sensitive to what the season is demanding of you. And then what does success look like for me in this season? So that's what I would say to people, is that be more sensitive to the seasons. What do the seasons demand of me? How can I ensure that I am living to the definition, the tenets of success I have defined for myself, and not what others have defined for me? A meaningful career is also a career that does not, how will I put it? A career that does not kill the life that it was meant to fund.
mm.
you know?
A career that does not kill the life it was meant to fund.
Yes. Yeah. And over time, you've got to, so is meaningful, is sustainable, but keeping that, making sure that over time, it does not consume this life that
Mm,
is meant to fund. And many people are actually in that space where the career is consuming them.
mm. Wow.
you know it's like saying it's a means to an end, right? I mean, it's not the end in itself. Life is the bigger picture, not
Mhm.
career. And sometimes I think we misplace those, and we think, yeah, life is what I do after my career, after. And so you have the leftovers, in that space. So be sensitive to the seasons, define what success looks like for you, and, do the check-ins periodically to ensure that it's still a career that funds your life and not the other way around.
Wow. Another powerful, powerful answer there. I mean, what I hear is success, whatever you define success as, should be personal to you.
Yes.
Shouldn't be about comparing with others. Define success on your own
Hmm.
terms. And a key thing I'm also taking away, and perhaps that's the reason why that disconnection or lack of fulfillment comes in. It's the fact that people don't realize that over time your career evolves. And so you have to pay attention to those seasons and those evolution,
Hmm.
and you may need to redefine success at that point in time. And so when you do that, that energy or re-energizing then comes in again. Really powerful, Nada. Thank you.
Yeah. I like you use the word energy, Adeola.
Yeah.
So I want to emphasize that protect your energy.
Mm,
If you want to build a meaningful and sustainable career over time, you've got to protect your energy.
yeah. So my final question to you today is, if you had just one piece of advice to give a professional out there trying to build a meaningful and globally relevant career from Africa today, what would it be?
Africa, my Africa. Okay, you know, this is dear to me. I am proudly African. I've lived and worked in different spaces that are non-African, and I take it upon myself to embody Africa.
Mm,
That's because I believe that when we're in spaces, especially when we're the only or the first person there, there's a bigger responsibility beyond the work itself. The
absolutely.
responsibility of others coming after you. How you show up determines to an extent if that door stays open for others that come after you, right? So to you, that professional who is trying to build from Africa, I'll say, what a wonderful opportunity you have. Africa is so diverse, and I think we very much undervalue that. I've lived and worked in Africa, so not just Nigeria, in different places. So I know for sure Africa is rich in its operating system, is rich in its diversity, it's rich in its complexity as well, it's rich in its dynamism. And so, what a fantastic toolkit you have
Mm,
without even realizing it. Because going into global spaces, you're going to talk a lot about complexity, skill, and you've got that. You're operating in an environment where things evolve very quickly. We talked about ambiguity earlier on, and you don't really see the full picture. That is what you're going to also have to play out on a global scale. So that one is first appreciate your your current landscape. Never underestimate or undervalue your journey. Where you start from doesn't necessarily limit your relevance. I want to remind you of that. And, if you really want to then go into spaces beyond Africa, all that we've said earlier on, will apply. Do the work, expand your network, your relationships. Don't be reactive about that. Be proactive about expansion into dimensions. Build your skills and capabilities in that and learn to learn the art of reframing of your experience using a universal global language that helps. And I would like to say finally, own your narrative, tell your story, be proud of your heritage, never diminish that.
wow. My takeaway is that coming from Africa to the world is not a curse. In fact, it is such a blessing because it prepares you for that global terrain that you're looking forward to. Wow. Thanks a lot, Ada. We have come to the end of the podcast today. It's been rich, it's been meaningful, and I have been truly blessed by our conversation today. So, professionals out there, if this has resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe so that people who need to get the access to this podcast are able to. Thank you so much, Ada. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.
Thank you for having me. Take good care too.